Hi everyone, welcome to this presentation. Today we're going to talk about transport in the UK, public transport, and we're going to talk about public transport and we're going to be using comparatives and superlatives. Okay, so when we're comparing something, and superlatives when something is the most or the least with an adjective. Okay, so transport in the UK. This presentation is going to look at transport in the city, in the big cities, London, Manchester, Liverpool, Edinburgh. So transport in the city, transport in the countryside or in small towns, transport between the towns and the cities as well. Okay. So how people move about, how people move inside cities and inside towns, and how people move between cities and towns. So yeah, we'll be using comparatives and superlatives. I've underlined the comparatives and superlatives in the presentation. So let's start in the city with underground trains. So there are underground trains in only 3 cities in the UK: London, Newcastle, and Glasgow. Of these 3 cities, London has the biggest underground train network. There are 11 lines. If we go back, we can see the different lines in this photo. Here you can see the different colors. Each one is a line, an underground line. So in London, there are 11 lines and 270 stations. So it's a very big network. And in London, the underground is called the Tube. People refer to it as the Tube. So the Tube in London is the fastest mode of transport. You can see an example of a superlative, the fastest mode of transport. In some cities, London included, you also have overground trains. So they're trains that travel on top of the ground. They don't go underground. And they travel inside the city. They don't leave the city, okay? So just trains inside the city, going to different parts of the city. And these trains are slower than the underground, but they are cheaper. So that's a benefit. So you've got 2 comparatives there. Overground trains are slower, but they are cheaper. Trams. This is the next form of transport we're going to talk about. Trams, they're a bit like trains, but in that they run on rails. These are the rails you can see here. These lines, they're the rails. So they run on rails, but they're slower than trains. And they also run on the street. You can see here people walking next to the trams. So they're on the street like buses or cars. And the most famous cities with trams are Manchester and Sheffield. This picture is in Manchester. So trams are, they're slower than trains. They're also cheaper than trains. And safer as well, because they're moving very slow. Next type of transport we have are buses. Of course, every city has buses, right? So buses are the most useful form of transport because they're the cheapest. They're also the slowest normally, but they're the cheapest form of transport and the most extensive. So there we've got 3 superlatives: the cheapest, the slowest, and the most extensive. By extensive, we mean that there are many, many buses going to different places, every part of the city. Yeah, so you can take a bus to anywhere in the city. Whereas with the tube, the underground, or the tram, you need there to be a station. Yeah. Whereas with the bus, you just need a bus stop. So you can take a bus almost anywhere. They're the most extensive form of transport. And buses like these red London buses, these ones with 2 floors, so you've got the downstairs and the upstairs, these are known as double deckers. Another form of transport in the city are the hire bicycles. So in some cities, London, Manchester, mostly in London, you have hire bicycles. So you pay a small amount of money, about the same as a bus, and you can hire a bicycle, like one of these, and ride around the city, and then leave it again in a bicycle station like this. So it's cheap. It's cheaper than the underground. It's about the same. Is as cheap as a bus. And over short distances, so 10, 15, 20 minutes, cycling is often faster than taking the bus or the train. Because there's less waiting. You don't have to go in the station, out of the station. So cycling is often faster. And it's also, of course, the healthiest option. Yeah, the best for your health and your body, because it's a form of exercise. So cycling, the healthiest option. Superlative. Okay, also last one for the city. So the city has many types of transport. We've got taxis as well. So they're the most expensive form of transport in the city. They're very expensive taxis. But I guess they're the most comfortable, maybe, the most exclusive, and maybe the most reliable at times, especially, or at night. They're the safest form of transport, some people think. So a black taxi, like these ones in London, they're also called a cab. So a taxi or a cab. And the driver, the taxi driver, so the person driving the taxi, is called a cabbie. So you have cab and cabbie. Taxi, taxi driver. Okay, so transport in the countryside or in small towns is a bit more limited. Generally, there's 2 forms of transport. There's the bus, and these buses are smaller. They're not double deckers, they're single deckers. And taxis, because at night there aren't any buses, so people maybe have to take the taxi. Whereas in the city, in the night time, there are still buses, there are trains. In the countryside, the buses are only in the day. So in the night, people have to take a taxi. Okay, so when you're going between a town and a city, so traveling between a town and a city, or between 2 cities, 2 towns, again, there's generally 2 options. The train or a coach. A coach is like a bus, but a long distance bus. If it's a long distance bus, we often call it a coach. Coaches are usually cheaper than trains. Trains are faster than coaches. Trains are more expensive than coaches, opposite of cheaper. Trains, you could probably say, are more comfortable than coaches. And trains are also more environmentally friendly than coaches. We can also say they are, instead of environmentally friendly, we can say greener, because they take more people and they're better for the environment. So there, between towns and cities, we have coach or train. Also, between big cities, yeah, so between London and Edinburgh, or London and Manchester, of course there's coaches and trains, but there's also internal flights, or we call them domestic flights as well, in small aeroplanes. Of course, they're not so popular because, well, internal flights, they are the quickest form of travel, of course, but they're the most expensive, they're the least green, most harmful for the environment, and, well, also they're the quickest form of transport in terms of the length of the flight, but when you have to take all the time to go to the airport, go through security, get on the plane, take the plane, arrive at the other airport, travel from the airport to the city centre, is actually quicker and cheaper to take a train or a coach. So for example, between London and Manchester, the train is 2.5 hours. Between London and Edinburgh, the train is about 5 hours. So it isn't too far or too long. Finally, the last type of transport I want to tell you about is, because the UK and especially Scotland, they have many islands, yeah, off the coast, little islands like these. So of course, people who live on the islands or people who want to visit the islands, they often have to take a ferry. A ferry is a boat for passengers. So of course, if you live on an island or want to visit an island, yeah, you have to take the ferry. So this is probably the last type of transport we have. Okay, to finish off, I want you to write 5 sentences about transport in your city or in your country, and I want you to use comparatives and superlatives like I did. So comparing trains and buses, or taxis and bicycles. Yeah. So 5 sentences. You can have like 8 minutes to finish this off. So just, yeah, pause the video, do the activity, and that's great. So thanks very much for listening, and have a great day. Bye bye.